Greetings and welcome to the Transform Podcast. This is your host, Christopher Anastasio. It's Thursday, August 18th, 2022, and welcome to episode 80 as we enter a new block of episodes starting with an 8, and we get closer and closer and closer to our 100th episode, which should be really special, closer to the end of the year. So yeah, guys, welcome back to the podcast. I think we're kind of back in a little bit better groove than we ended July with and started August with. Combination of illness and some intense travel turnaround times and so forth. But yeah, welcome back, guys. I think, what I wanted to do with today's episode is, and by the way, just a plug for our last episode, 79, shifting platforms. If you guys are... Well, I would say that that's probably one of the episodes that I would actually kind of put into more of like a mandatory listening kind of category. If you're doing anything on social media, and of course, if you're listening to this podcast, I'm pretty sure you're doing something with social media, or you would have left the podcast a long time ago. But that episode explored the notion that the platforms that you should be emphasizing, or that you might be emphasizing before are changing. If you were more Instagram heavy, you might want to rethink that. If you were all in on TikTok only, you might want to rethink that a little bit. So we talked in that episode about some of the more emergent formats and platforms, that I kind of see and hear in the industry getting a little bit more attention. And we went through the number one, which was YouTube Shorts. The number two, which was in order, number one, Facebook Organic, number two, YouTube Shorts, and then number three, TikTok, with less emphasis on Instagram. So a declining emphasis on Instagram, given a variety of factors. I don't want to go into all of them here and repeat the episode, but it's really kind of an intriguing episode, guys, if you are kind of confused about where to be or which platform to be on, or you're maybe even, just geeked out a little bit by social media and you're always kind of following the next trend and looking for the next opening to sort of run through, I would check out episode 79. So anyway, in today's episode, I kind of want to do a little bit of an outgrowth of that episode and think out loud here with you guys a little bit about the concept of context and, how you approach creating content for different platforms and making sure that that content is contextually relevant to the platform. And I think, if you've listened to most of our episodes or certain episodes that focus on volume, either way, you've probably gotten a sense over time of our emphasis on the preference that if you're using digital means to promote your business, if you're on social media, that you should really be looking for every possible way that you can, number one, create volume, and number two, distribute that volume as widely as possible. And there's no question that that's better than doing the opposite. That's better than doing very little volume. It's better than being only in one place, let's say versus 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. So we're not going to walk that back. But this episode is more about how you take it to the next level. Like, how do you create a lot of volume, get into a lot of places, get onto a lot of distribution platforms, i.e. social media apps, or accounts, whatever you want to call it. But also make content that is contextually relevant to that platform. And so that's sort of the challenge that you're going to find breaking through is not very easily done. Much more easily said than done. And the reason I say that is, like if you're not producing a lot of volume, you can carve out an extra hour or two here and there and crank out a bunch more videos or bang out a bunch more tweets. I mean, you can kind of fix volume, I think, pretty quickly. Okay, I mean, it's probably more like a habitual change to create more volume than you were before, right? And then to put it on more platforms is just maybe like adding an extra step or two to the process. So if you make a quick TikTok video, but then you hear our podcast and you're like, oh, well, I got to be on Instagram and YouTube Shorts. we could take that same video and just post it in 2 more places. So those recommendations that we make, that it's much better to do volume versus not, it's much better to be in multiple places than not, those things, if you just sort of change your mindset a little bit, you can fix them fairly easily. You can start following that advice fairly easily. The problem becomes when you have to take what you're doing in those 2 areas, volume and multiple platforms, and you literally have to do it slightly or maybe a lot different per platform. So now all of a sudden, that 1-minute video you shot for TikTok doesn't quite seem to fit as well on YouTube Shorts or Instagram Reels. And it has to be reshot slightly differently, or it has to be edited slightly differently. This is where I think you cross over into a real drain on time. This is where, this is the level that to get to it, you've either done one of 2 things, quite frankly. You've either hired somebody to do this for you and kind of, not to say you're not involved at all. I mean, you're probably still involved with it. But you have somebody doing editing for you. You have somebody creating, multiple ideas for you to kind of choose from. Maybe you actually do hand off some of the content production to somebody else. Let's say if your face doesn't have to appear or whatever. So you're either handing it off to somebody on some level, handing all of it off or a lot of it off or some of it off, or you've crossed over from working, let's say, inside your business to working on your business, and you have sort of mentally made the shift that you are now sort of like a full-time marketer. And then your business sort of runs itself. You have people who can run that business and keep that business going, and, just basically, free you up to completely focus on content development, branding, social media presence, things like that. So I think that's why this is not the easiest conversation to have with a client or with somebody who, let's say, is in your shoes, because this isn't just asking you to change your mindset and make a couple tweaks to your weekly habits. This is about really kind of understanding, like deeply understanding the platforms that you're on, and then going the extra mile to create content and create material that is substantively different across these different platforms. So one of the examples I wanted to run you guys through here, and look, I'm going to be very frank with you guys. This isn't a pure science, and I don't have all the answers. I'm not going to sit here and tell you, well, here's the exact formula on how to differentiate between this platform, this. It kind of depends. And I know that answer kind of drives everybody crazy when you hear that. I mean, I hear it in all different walks of life, when it comes to the law or it comes to taxes or it comes to finance, it all depends, right? It depends on which platforms we're talking about, what kind of format you're using. Is it short form video? Is it long form video? Is it textual, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's that variable. And then it also may depend on I don't want to say may, it probably depends also on your industry, your service area, the topic you're talking about, the audience that goes with that topic. So there's a lot of factors that have to be taken into account. But I just wanted to kind of breezily walk you through an example of what I mean in terms of how this kind of mechanically comes together. Like how does this mechanically look and feel when you change up the platform, but let's say the format's the same. So for example, let's just kind of dive into that. So let's say you're making short form video. And previously you were like, yeah, Chris, heard a couple of the podcasts, you talked about TikTok, so I'm banging out, 1 and 3 minute videos on TikTok, 4 or 5 times a day, and that's where I am. And yeah, once in a while I take that TikTok video and I post it on Instagram Reels or I post it on YouTube Shorts. Okay, now, if you're doing that, you're probably way ahead of your peers. Okay, let me just be frank. I mean, if you're posting that often, if you're spreading the content out, you're probably way ahead of the next person or the next business. Just if I was a gambling man, I would say you're probably ahead of your peers. But here's the problem, is that when you take that TikTok video and you record it inside TikTok, so now you got a little TikTok watermark on it. Now you throw it in Instagram Reels. Instagram doesn't like TikTok videos, so they algorithmically downplay your content right off the bat. And then you throw it on YouTube Shorts, and who knows what's going to happen to it over there. because again, it wasn't created natively on YouTube, and it's maybe not geared towards the YouTube audience. So there's still a headwind that you're sailing into, right? So here's the deal. So this is kind of what I mean by platform specific. So let's say you were going to make a 1-minute video about, and let's go to finance again, an area that I have some exposure to. Let's say you're going to make a 1-minute video on how to complete a certain kind of tax form. And you thought, well, I'll just walk through the tax form, film it, very quickly, like a very quick 1-minute overview. I'll edit it so that there's no skips or anything. You just kind of like go step by step by step by step to the key steps, and then I'll post it. Well, you might look at it this way. So YouTube is the second largest search engine in the world behind Google. It's a very search-centric, education-centric platform. So you might say, okay, my YouTube short is going to be very educational, very kind of serious. I'm not going to do anything whimsical or fun or anything like that. It's going to be serious. It's going to be straightforward. And it's going to be edited very cleanly. Because let's say maybe I have a YouTube channel that I want to put that short onto, let's say, a shorts playlist. And so I want it to kind of, seamlessly integrate with my channel. I just want it to be short, and I want it to get into the shorts pipeline. So you would, set up in front of the camera. Let's say you have a formal background behind you. You've got, let's say, a picture of the tax return over your shoulder or something like that, superimposed or whatever. And you go step by step by step by step by step, 60 seconds, YouTube short. Okay, now let's go over to TikTok. Now, on TikTok, like I said, if you're getting into these platforms and you really understand what their nature, their cultural, kind of atmospherics are like, you might say, well, TikTok is a little bit more whimsical than YouTube. It's a little less education centric, although it's gaining in that area. It's definitely gone away from just silly videos and making people do a double take. But it's not quite the same thing as YouTube. It's not a massive search engine. It's not a place where you're hosting a whole channel of long form videos. Even if you have the 10-minute video option on TikTok, you're probably not treating long form video the same way there. So you might say, okay, I'm going to make the same video, but this time I'm going to inject a little bit of humor. I'm going to put some music in the background potentially. I might do some interesting things with like textual captions, right? So I may make certain captions appear and disappear that kind of highlight what I'm saying along the way. That might have been a little bit more distracting, let's say, on YouTube Shorts, but they're maybe more expected and more welcome on TikTok, okay? And so now I have the same intent in the video to educate somebody about the tax return, but instead of approaching it in a very stead, formal way, I'm doing it a little bit more whimsically, a little bit more humorously, and a little bit more visually eye-catching, okay? Okay, so now I've filmed 2 videos to cover the same topic. You see what I'm saying about time commitment and that sort of thing? I think, if you didn't understand before, now you're starting to get a sense of that. Okay, now let's talk about Instagram Reels. And you say, okay, well, now I've got a YouTube short and a TikTok video. Can I just throw one of those on Instagram Reels? Well, you can, but you may not want to as you come to understand the platform better. So Instagram Reels, to me personally, is the more esoteric of the 3. Okay, I think YouTube Shorts is kind of at one extreme. I think TikTok videos are at another extreme, where they're certainly separated from each other on the spectrum. But Instagram Reels, you got to understand, like, what was Instagram from the beginning? It was photos, it was eye-catching, still images, perfectly framed, perfectly lit, filtered, that sort of stuff, right? So it was a very artistic kind of platform, right? So you might say, well, with Instagram Reels, maybe I'm going to be a little more TikTok-ish than YouTube Short-ish, but I'm going to look at things like aesthetic. I'm going to look at things like atmospheric. I'm going to look at the background. I'm going to look at, let's say, what I'm wearing. I'm going to look at, I may be more thoughtful about the musical choice so that there's something, maybe the music is more contextual than atmospheric. Like instead of kind of being, let's say, a bouncy type of thing on TikTok that kind of like goes along with the quick nature of the steps that I'm going through, maybe the music is a little bit more relevant topic-wise. Maybe the song has something to do with what the tax return theme is, something about money or something, something about prosperity or whatever. You guys get the point that I'm trying to differentiate there. And so that's the way you might approach an Instagram Reel that has a few more of those type of elements in it. It's a little bit more flavored in that direction, okay? So, again, it's not to say that it's pure science, or I would just sit here and tell you the exact formula for each platform. And I'd say exactly how long it should be and exactly what you should say and exactly how often you should say it, et cetera, et cetera. And it's not that easy, guys. There is science because there's an algorithm at work, right? There's metrics being crunched in an algorithm. But there's something artistic about it. There's something about, when you're trying to create your reel, you look at your news feed, you look at your stories, you say, what is the audience, coming back to the Instagram Reel question, what do we make that look like? What are people reacting to in your newsfeed? What are people reacting to in your stories? Where are you getting more traction and more attention that you can then grab elements of those things, say, okay, what did I do right here? What kind of looked and felt right, and how can I inject that into my reel? Okay. So again, that's why it's very abstract in a sense, and it could very well be vastly different. I mean, I think it's going to be at least, I think it's going to be in a nuanced way different for everybody, but it could be vastly different in terms of what works for one person and their audience, in terms of differentiating these three platforms that I walked you through, these short form video platforms, versus, let's say, somebody else who doesn't maybe have to change up as much as let's say, the next person. So, but I wanted to walk you guys through that because it's an interesting dilemma that from our perspective, we work with a client or a prospect, this isn't, we cannot overlay a template over everybody and say, okay, bring in client number one. Here's how you do your short. Here's how you do your TikTok. Here's how you do your Instagram Reel. Boom. Off you go, on your way. Client number two, overlay the template. Boom, boom, boom. Off you go. We can't do it that way. You have to look at all these different factors. Look at the client's business. Look at the client's audience. Look at the demographics of their, how their business interacts with that audience. And who's coming to get that service or that product. We have to take all that into account. We have to take into account what's worked for that client, if anything at all, if they've already been, putting content out or not. We just have to look at that. We have to look at what the trends are in the industry. We have to look at what competitors are doing. Are competitors getting traction one way but not another? And that sort of thing. So it's a very analytical process. And this is where I'll be very honest with you guys. If you try to take this on your own, you're a brave soul. Because for us who do this for a living, this isn't easy. This is maybe one of those Rubik's Cubes, if you will, if you're familiar with the famous toy from the 1980s here in the States. This is one of those Rubik's Cubes that has to be figured out for every client. And it's not simple and straightforward. It requires some brain power. It requires experimentation. It requires trying things, seeing those things fail, and then redoubling the effort and saying, okay, well, we crossed off a couple of these possibilities. Let's try a few more of these other possibilities and marry them up with the things that are working. So that's, that is not an easy process. And if you're in the middle of running a business, and if you're in the middle of trying to do, certain types of things with your business and all the other hats you have to wear, this is a very daunting thing to take on. And I'm not going to sit here and say you can't have any success if you don't do it. I mean, if you're pumping out content, you're on a bunch of platforms, and you don't do this, like I said, you're probably still ahead of other people in your space. Okay? But you're probably not ahead of everybody, because somebody out there is doing what I'm talking about. Somebody or some people are doing what I'm talking about. And yeah, they're pumping out a lot of content, and yeah, they're on a lot of platforms, but yeah, they're contextually relevant on those platforms, and they're having an easier time being found, being discovered, and being consumed on those platforms. Okay, so we're gonna wrap it up here, guys. Right about 20-minute mark. It's food for thought. It's something to think about. I really think you guys have to kind of look at this with a critical eye. You got to be honest with yourself. Is this something you can really take on? Is this something you're even going to try to take on? Or are you going to accept the fact that if you don't take it on, you're probably a little bit more back in the middle of the pack in terms of social media and digital marketing, traction and so forth for your business? But it's really it's something that you got to confront it. You got to think about it, and you got to confront it. ignoring it doesn't make it go away, doesn't make it less true. Okay? So we're going to wrap it up here, guys. Really honored that you guys joined us for episode 80 of the podcast. It's been a fun ride since last October as we close in on the 1-year anniversary of the podcast and approach episode 100. Hope everybody's having a great week. I know the week is winding down. Summertime winding down here in the United States. My favorite season coming to a close here soon. That's kind of sad. But we will be back by the weekend at the latest with episode 81. So we'll have 2 episodes for you this week, guys, as we get back in our rhythm. And then, of course, next week, the week of August 22nd, we will have episodes 82 and 83. And like I said, I think we're on track for episode 100 somewhere around, let's see, probably going to be pretty late in the year, about 10 weeks or so from now. So we're talking about probably like the November-ish time frame or something around there. So anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed this episode. Hope it gives you something to think about. You can always reach out to us to discuss and kind of confer or strategize a little bit. Initial consultation, is free. So you can reach out to us on LinkedIn and Facebook at Pransform. Go over to the website, pransform.com. And of course, we always appreciate you subscribing to and liking the podcast. So with that, guys, I'm going to leave it here. Like I said, we'll have episode 81 up either Friday or Saturday of this week as we get back into 2 episode a week rhythm. So thanks for listening, guys. Really appreciate it. Hope everybody has a great rest of the day, and we will see you again soon. Bye-bye.